Members of the DOGE team asked that their activities not be logged on the system and then appeared to try to cover their tracks behind them, turning off monitoring tools, and manually deleting records of their access. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy how they're trying to basically steal sensitive information, but they're like, yeah, but protect our sensitive information. You know what I mean? A whistleblower discloses details how DOGE may have taken sensitive labor data. It's exactly what I wanted to have, sensitive information. Yes. In the first days of March, a team of advisors from President Trump's new Department of Government Efficiency Initiative arrived at the Southeast Washington, D.C. headquarters of the National Labor Relations Board. The small independent federal agency investigates and adjudicates complaints about unfair labor practices. Oh, this is the one that saves us a bunch of money, right? From getting screwed over by big business. Okay, cool. Yeah. We don't want that, right? Wasn't it something like it saved us $40 billion in basically fraud? And we're getting rid of it. It stores reams of potential sensitive information, from confidential information about employees who want to form unions to proprietary business information. The DOGE employees, who are effectively led by White House advisor and billionaire tech CEO Elon Musk, who no one voted for, and is very sensitive to people not liking him, appeared to have their sights set on accessing the NLRB's internal systems. They've said their unit's overall mission is to review agency data from the compliance with the new administration's policies to cut costs and maximize efficiency, which they haven't done at all. But according to an official whistleblower disclosed, shared with Congress and other federal overseers that was obtained by NPR, subsequent interviews with the whistleblower and records of internal communications, technical staff members were alarmed about what DOGE engineers did when they were granted access, particularly when those staffers noticed a spike in data leaving the agency. It's possible that the data included sensitive information on unions, which he hates, by the way. Him and Donald Trump, then was it an interview or a phone call or something, where they went on to talk about how much they hated unions, basically. Ongoing legal cases and corporate secrets, data that 4 labor law experts tell NPR should almost never leave the NLRB, and that has nothing to do with making the government more efficient or cutting spending. Yeah, it's almost like that's not their goal, right? Almost like that's not their goal, and that they actually have no interest in doing that. Meanwhile, according to the disclosure and records of internal communications, members of the DOGE team asked that their activities not be logged on the system and then appeared to try to cover their tracks behind them, turning off monitoring tools, and manually deleting records of their access. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy how they're trying to basically steal sensitive information, but they're like, yeah, but protect our sensitive information. You know what I mean? Isn't that so awesome? Isn't that so cool? Evasive behavior that several cybersecurity experts interviewed by the NPR compared to what criminal or state-sponsored hackers might do. Oh, isn't that crazy how they also have hackers that are doing this for Elon Musk? You know what I mean? 19 and 25-year-old hackers. The employees grew concerned that the NLRB's confidential matter could be exposed, particularly after they started detecting suspicious login attempts from the IP address in Russia. Yes! That's why I want sensitive information going. Russia! Yes! According to the disclosure, eventually the disclosure continued. The IT department launched a formal review of what it deemed a serious ongoing security breach or potentially illegal removal of personally identifiable information. The whistleblower believes that the suspicious activity warrants further investigation by the agencies with more resources, like the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency or the FBI. The labor law experts interviewed by NPR feared that if the data gets out, to Russia, it could be abused, including by private companies with cases before the agency that might get insights into damaging testimony, union leadership, legal strategies, and internal data on competitors. Musk's SpaceX among them. Oh, cool. Yes, using presidency for your personal gain. Let's go. Using the office of government for your personal gain. That's so base, isn't it? It could also intimidate whistleblowers who might speak up about unfair labor practices. And it could sow distrust in the NLRB's independence, they said. Dude, every time I read an article about how the government's going, it just makes me lose energy, I think. I need to get up to like 2 cups of coffee now. The new revelations about DOGE's activities at the labor agency come from a whistleblower in the IT department of the NLRB who disclosed his concerns to Congress and the U.S. Office of Special Counsel in a detailed report that was then provided to NPR. Meanwhile, his attempts to raise concerns internally with the NLRB preceded someone physically taping a threatening note to his door that included sensitive personal information and overhead photos of him walking his dog that appeared to be taken with a drone. That is wild. According to a cover letter attached to his disclosure filed by his attorney, Andrew Bakaj, sorry if I mispronounced that, of the nonprofit Whistleblower Aid. Oh, cool. That's awesome. People that had this happen to them, we used to call them like paranoid schizophrenics, but I guess everyone's just like normal now because it's just happening for real. Dude, imagine if your neighbor comes up to you and he's like, yo, this morning I woke up and to my door I had a note that had a picture of me with a drone shot walking my dog, and it was like threatening me. You'd be like, all right, Tony. Yeah, that totally happened. Yeah, where's the picture? And then you'd never see the picture, and you'd be like, all right, yeah, just watch out for those drones, buddy. The whistleblower's account is corroborated by internal documentation and was reviewed by 11 technical experts across the government agencies and the private sector. In total, NPR spoke to over 30 sources across the government, the private sector, the labor movement, cybersecurity, and law enforcement who spoke to their own concerns about how DOGE and the Trump administration might be handling sensitive data and the implications for its exposure. Much of the following account comes from the whistleblower's official disclosure and interviews with NPR. I can't attest to what their end goal was. I do. I can attest to it. I'm pretty sure it's just all self-motivated, but, that's neither here nor there, or what they're doing with the data, probably bad things, I can only assume, said the whistleblower Daniel Berulis. Sorry if I mispronounced that. In an interview with NPR, but I can tell you that the bits of the puzzle that I can quantify are scary. This is a very bad picture we're looking at. The whistleblower's story sheds further light on how DOGE is operating inside the federal systems and comes on the heels of testimony in more than a dozen court cases across the United States that reveal how DOGE rapidly gained access to private information and personal information on hundreds of millions of Americans. I'm just like thinking about like how the founding fathers are looking down on us, and they're like, dude, why the F do you have some random South African person like going through our government and dismantling it? Like, that's insane. They would say that. They'd say like, that's like insane. George Washington, 2025. It's unclear how or whether DOGE is protecting the privacy of the data. It's not probably. Let me guess. Meanwhile, the threatening note though its origins are unknown. Let me guess, it's a 19-year-old hacker at the direction of the crybaby Elon Musk, I think. That'd probably be my guess. Is reflective of current climate or fear and intimidation towards whistleblowers. Yes, intimidating whistleblowers 2025. Let's go. Tim Beres, the NLRB's acting press secretary, denied that the agency granted DOGE access to its systems and said that DOGE had not requested access to the agency's systems. Beres said that the agency conducted an investigation after Berulis raised his concerns, but determined that had no breach in systems occurred. Okay, well, that's good to hear, at least. Notwithstanding the NLRB's denial, the whistleblower's disclosure to Congress and other federal overseers includes forensic data and records of conversations with the colleagues that provided evidence of DOGE access to and activities. Okay, well, sounds like it actually did happen. Well, I had hope for like a paragraph. Well, data doesn't lie. I mean, literally does not lie. Meanwhile, NPR's extensive reporting makes clear that DOGE's access to the data is widespread concern across the government. Oh yeah, of course. If they're doing that to one branch, you could assume that they're doing that to all of them. I mean, like, it's pretty clear. Across the government, 11 sources directly familiar with internal operations in federal agencies and in Congress told NPR that they share Berulis' concern, and some have seen the evidence that DOGE is exfiltrating sensitive data for unknown reasons. A representative DOGE did not respond to NPR's request for comment. It's crazy how the only headline that we're getting when we get like daily news like this is...
But, you know, I've always been interested in astrophysics.
Yeah, so that's pretty much what everyone's paying attention to is Katy Perry going to space. But, you know, good for her. Kill me. Okay. Berulis started about 6 months before President Trump was inaugurated for a second term this past January. Berulis said that he hit the ground running, securing the NLRB's cloud-based data servers and reinforcing what's called a zero trust principles, which means that users can only get access to parts of the system they need in order to do their job. No more, no less. That way, if an attacker gets hold of a single username and password, the attacker can't access the whole system. Awesome. That sounds like something that should be, you know, used and followed. When I first started, it was a dream come true, he said. There was a great opportunity to build up and do something good. But after the inauguration, he described a culture of fear descending over the agency. Wow, I wonder why. DOGE arrives. The first week of March, engineers associated with DOGE arrived at the NLRB's headquarters, according to the Berulis disclosure. Beforehand, they had asked about what software, hardware, programming languages, and applications the NLRB was using. DOGE learned that it used commercially available cloud infrastructure that businesses typically use, which connects to government cloud systems at other agencies and can be accessed remotely. Berulis said that he and several colleagues saw a black SUV and police escort enter the garage, after which building security let the DOGE staffers in. They interacted with a small number of staffers, never introducing themselves to the most of the IT team. Cool. Berulis says he was told by colleagues that DOGE employees demanded the highest level access, what are called tenant owner level accounts inside the independent agency's computer systems with essentially unrestricted permissions to read, copy, and alter data, according to Berulis' disclosure. When an IT staffer suggested a streamlined process to activate those accounts in a way that would let their activities be tracked in accordance with the NLRB security policies, the IT staffers were told to stay out of DOGE's way. The disclosure continues. For cybersecurity professionals, a failure to log activity is a cardinal sin and contradicts best practices as recommended by the National Institute of Standards and Technology and the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, as well as the FBI and National Security Agency. That was a huge red flag, said Berulis. Oh, I need some water. What's going on? That was a huge red flag, said Berulis. That's something that you just don't do. It violates every core concept of security and best practices. I might not make it to the end of this article. My God, I'm losing my voice. Those forensic digital records are important for record-keeping requirements, and they allow for troubleshooting. But they also allow experts to investigate potential breaches, sometimes even tracing the attacker's path back to the vulnerability that let them inside a network. I can tell you the vulnerability that was let inside the network literally walked through the front doors. That's what the vulnerability was. The records can also help experts see what data might have been removed. Basic logs would likely not be enough to demonstrate the extent of a bad actor's activities, but it would be a start. There's no reason for any legitimate user to turn off logging or other security tools, cybersecurity experts say. Well, the reason is because you're doing stuff that you don't want to get out, right? You're doing stuff that you don't want to be logged. You're doing illegal, potentially, activities that you don't want to be logged. That's literally the only reason I could even possibly think of. There's another one, let me know. None of this is normal, said Jake Braun, the executive director of the Cyber Policy Initiative at the University of Chicago's Harris School of Public Policy and former acting principal deputy national security director at the White House. In an interview with NPR about the whistleblower's disclosure, this type of activity is why the government buys insider threat monitoring technology. This is why we pay money to stop people like this from doing things like this. We actually spend good money. Probably why? Because it's important. So we can know things like this are happening and stop sensitive data exfiltration before it happens, he told NPR. However, the NLRB's budget hasn't had the money to pay for tools like that for years, Berulis said. It's almost like these government agencies actually need more funding, not less funding, to be more efficient. Isn't that kind of crazy? Efficient and safe. They should add safe to that. Efficient and safe is what we need. A backdoor to government systems, question mark. A couple days after DOGE arrived, Berulis saw something else that alarmed him while browsing the internet over the weekend. Massachusetts Institute of Technology graduate and DOGE engineer Jordan Wick had been sharing information about coding project he was working on to his public account with GitHub. If you don't know, GitHub is basically just a website where you can version share your project or open source your project or your code with other people or project members. A website that allows developers to create... Okay, they've immediately described what I'm trying to explain here. A website that allows developers to create, store, and collaborate on code. That was a much more concise answer than me. After journalist Roger Sollenberger started posting on X about the account, Berulis noticed something Wick was working on, a project or a repository titled NXGen BDOR Extract. That sounds so ominous. Wick made it private. Before Berulis could investigate further, he told NPR. But to Berulis, the title itself was revealing. So when I saw this tool, I immediately panicked, just for the lack for a better term. He said, I kind of had a conniption and said, whoa, whoa, whoa. He immediately alerted his whole team. While NPR was unable to recover the code for the project, the name itself suggests that Wick could have been designing a backdoor or BDOR to extract files from the NLRB's internal case management systems, known as NXGen, according to several cybersecurity experts who reviewed Berulis' conclusions. Wait, so he like left code in the database so that he could like backdoor information whenever he wanted? I think that's what I'm kind of reading. Which would be, God, I feel like that's like treasonous. That must be like a treasonous thing. Can't imagine how never mind, I'm going to continue. Wick did not respond to NPR's request for comment. NX Gen B door extract. God, that is so ominous of a name. A screenshot of DOGE engineers Jordan Wick's public GitHub account that shows NX Gen B door extract. The name itself suggests that Wick could have been designing a backdoor or B door to extract files from the NLRB's internal case management system. It definitely seems rather odd to name it that, said one of the engineers that who built NXGen, and asks for anonymity so as not to jeopardize their ability to work with the government again. Or brazen if you're not worried about consequences. The whole idea of removing logging and getting tenant level access is the whole disturbing part to me. Yeah, no wonder. So you can put like Trojan horses in our freaking government agency, basically. The engineer said, NXGen is an internal system that was designed specifically for the NLRB's in-house, according to several of the engineers who created the tool and who all spoke to NPR on condition of anonymity to avoid retaliation or adverse consequences for any future government work. I mean, they have to have anonymity, right? Because they're literally axing everyone from the government on like the slightest excuse. So like, that's super reasonable. I'd prefer everyone to be public, obviously, but I mean, given the actions of this department, it seems like it's pretty reasonable that you'd want anonymity here. The engineers explained that while many of the NLRB's records are eventually made public, the NXGen case management system hosts proprietary data from corporate competitors, personal information about union members or employees voting to join a union, and witness testimony in ongoing cases. Access to the data is protected by numerous federal laws, including the Privacy Act. So what we're saying is that was illegal. Another illegal thing. Yay! More illegal. Those engineers were also concerned by DOGE staffers' insistence that their activities not be logged. Wonder why? Maybe it's because there's something called the Privacy Act. That's so crazy how those things work out, huh? Allowing them to probe the NLRB system and discover information about potential security flaws or vulnerabilities without being detected. If he didn't know the backstory, any chief information security officer worth his salt would look at the network activity like this and assume it's a nation-state attack from China or Russia. It probably might still be just at the heads of a certain South African person that cries when his stock goes down. Said Braun, the former White House cyber official. Putting the puzzle pieces together. About a week after arriving, DOGE engineers had left the NLRB and deleted their accounts, according to Berulis' disclosure to Congress. In the office, Berulis had a limited visibility into what the DOGE team was up to in real time. That's partly because he said the NLRB isn't advanced when it comes to detecting insider threats or potentially malicious actors inside the agency itself. Shouldn't be a problem usually, right? We as an agency have not evolved to account for those. Yeah, no flippity flip, he explained. We were looking for bad actors outside, he said. Yeah, I mean, who would have guessed the president of the United States would be the bad actor sending goons over? It's not something I think any department is probably prepared for. But he counted on DOGE leaving at least a few traces of its activities behind activity behind. Puzzle pieces he could assemble to try to put together a picture of what happened. Details he included in his official disclosure. First, at least one DOGE account was created and later deleted for use in the NLRB's cloud system hosted by Microsoft. And then it's got this long string, DOGE SA underscore 2D5C 3E blah, 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 Microsoft.com. Then DOGE engineers installed what's called a container, quote unquote, a kind of opaque virtual computer that can run programs on a machine without revealing the activities to the rest of the network on its own. That wouldn't be suspicious, though it did allow engineers to work invisibly and left no trace of its activities once it was removed. Why all the secrecy, Elon? Why all the secrecy? So crazy how you want so much privacy, but you're trying to get all of our privacy. That's so weird, isn't it? Just coincidences, I suppose. Then Berulis started tracking sensitive data, leaving the places it's meant to live, according to his official disclosure. First, he saw a chunk of data exiting the NX-Gen case management system's quote-unquote nucleus inside the NLRB system, Berulis explained. Then, he saw a large spike in outbound traffic leaving the network itself, almost like a backdoor for data information. And that just a huge spike of data the day that they came, basically. That's what this graph shows for anyone that's listening and not watching. That's wild. That's wild. From what he could see, the data leaving almost all text files, adding up to around 10 gigabytes of text files. For anyone that knows, text files are not large. 10 gigabytes of text files is a ginormous amount of text files of just pure data. Or the equivalent of a full stack of encyclopedias if someone printed them. Yeah, he explained. It's a sizable chunk of total data in the NLRB system. Though the agency itself hosts around 10 terabytes of historical data, it's unclear which files were copied and removed or whether they were consolidated and compressed, which could mean even more data was exfiltrated. This is so panic-inducing. It's almost, I can't imagine the stress this gives on the employees trying to just do a good job, an honest good job. It's also possible that DOGE ran queries looking for specific files in the NLRB system and took only what it was looking for, according to the disclosure. Regardless, the kind of spike is extremely unusual, Berulis explained, because the data almost never directly leaves the NLRB's database. In his disclosure, Berulis shared a screenshot tracking data entering and exiting the system, and there's only one noticeable spike of data going out. He also confirmed that no one of the NLRB had been saving backup files that week or migrating data for any projects. So it's only clearly one person could have done this. One group of people, I suppose. Even the external parties like lawyers or overseers like the Inspector General are granted guest accounts. Even the Inspector General are granted guest accounts on the system. It's only to view the files relevant to the case, to their case or investigation, explained labor law experts who worked with or at the NLRB in interviews with NPR. None of the confidential and deliberative information should ever leave the agency. Oops, said Richard Griffin, who was the NLRB General Counsel from 2013 to 2017 in an interview with NPR. We are under assault right now. For cybersecurity experts, that spike in data leaving the system is a key indicator of a breach, Berulis explained. We are under assault right now. He remembered thinking. When Berulis asked his IT colleagues whether they knew why the data was exfiltrated or whether someone else had been using containers to run code on the system in recent weeks, no one knew anything about it or the other unusual activities on the network, according to his disclosure. In fact, when they looked into the spike, they found that logs that were used to monitor outbound traffic from the systems were absent. Some actions taken had been taken on the network, including data exfiltration, had no attribution. Except to a deleted account, he continued. Really? Who deleted the account again? Let me remember who had a deleted account. Nobody knows who deleted the logs or how they could have gone missing, Berulis said. The IT team met to discuss insider threats, namely the DOGE engineers whose activities it had little insight into or control over. Let's stop calling them DOGE engineers. Can we just call them DOGE hackers? DOGE attackers, I think is more accurate of a name. He explained. Those conversations are reflected in his official disclosure. They eventually launched a formal breach investigation, according to the disclosure, and prepared a request for assistance from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security CISA. However, those efforts were disturbed without an explanation, Berulis said. That was deeply troubling to Berulis, who felt he needed help to try to get to the bottom of what happened and determine what new vulnerabilities might be exploited as a result. In the days after Berulis and his colleagues prepared a request for the CISA's help investigating the branch, Berulis found a printed letter in an envelope taped to his door, which included threatening language, sensitive personal information, and an overhead picture of him walking his dog. According to the cover letter attached to his official disclosure, it's unclear who sent it, but the letter made specific reference to report the breach. Law enforcement is investigating the letter. That's wild. That's so crazy, dude. It's like he's going to be like assassinated. If the underlying disclosure wasn't concerning enough, the targeted physical intimidation and surveillance of my client is. If this is happening to Mr. Berulis, it's likely happening to others and brings our nation more in line with authoritarian regimes than with open and free democracies, wrote Bakaj. Sorry for the pronunciation. His attorney, in a statement sent to NPR. It is time for everyone, and the Congress in particular, to acknowledge the facts and stop our democracy, freedom, and liberties from slipping away, something that will take generations to repair, if it can be repaired. In part because of the stymied internal investigation and the attempts to silence him, Berulis decided to come forward publicly. What a brave guy. What an awesome dude. In fact, despite all that, Berulis managed to uncover some stranger and more troubling details about what happened while DOGE was logged on, which he enumerated in his official declaration. Unknown users also gave themselves a high-level access key, what's called an SAS token, meaning shared access signature, to access storage accounts before deleting it. Berulis said that there was no way to track what they did with it. Someone had disabled controls that would prevent insecure or unauthorized mobile devices from logging onto the system without proper security settings. There was an interface exposed to the public internet, potentially allowing malicious actors access to the NLRB's system. Internal alerting and monitoring systems were found to be manually turned off. Multi-factor authentication was disabled, and Berulis noticed that an unknown user had exported a user roster, quote-unquote, a file with contact information for outside lawyers who have worked with NLRB. Berulis said that he noticed 5 PowerShell downloads on the system, a task automation program that would allow engineers to run automated commands. There were several code libraries that got his attention, tools that he said appeared to be designed to automate and mask data exfiltration. Whew, that's pretty crazy. There was a tool to generate a seemingly endless number of IP addresses called, quote, requests-ip-rotator, quote, and a commonly used automation tool for web developers called Browserless. Both repositories starred and or favorited by Wick, the DOGE engineer, according to an archive of his GitHub account reviewed by NPR. While investigating the data taken from the agency, Berulis tried to determine its ultimate destination, but whoever had exfiltrated it had disguised its destination too, according to the disclosure. DOGE staffers had permission to access the system, but removing data is another matter. Berulis says someone appeared to be doing something called a DNS tunneling to prevent the data exfiltration from being detected. He came to that conclusion, outlined in his disclosure, after he saw a traffic spike in DNS requests parallel to the data being exfiltrated. A spike 1,000 times the normal number of requests. Remember the graph? I think that's what he's referring to. When someone uses this kind of technique, they set up a domain name that pings the target system with questions or queries. But they configure the compromised server so that it answers those DNS queries by sending out packets of data, allowing the attacker to steal information that has been broken down into smaller chunks. We've seen Russian threat actors do things like this on US government systems, says one threat intelligence researcher who requests anonymity because they weren't authorized to speak publicly by their employer. That analyst, who has extensive experience hunting national state-sponsored hackers, reviewed the whistleblower's technical claims. The difference is they were given the keys to the front door, the researcher continued. While the researcher clarified that it would be difficult to fully verify what happened without full access to the NLRB system, they said Berulis' conclusion and accompanying evidence were a case for concern. None of this is standard, they said. Russ Handorf, who served in the FBI for a decade in various cybersecurity roles, also reviewed Berulis' extensive technical forensic records and analysis and spoke to NPR about his conclusions. All of this is alarming, he said. If this was a publicly traded company, I would have to report this breach to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Dang. The timeline of events demonstrates a lack of respect for the institution and for sensitivity of the data that was exfiltrated. There is no reason to increase the security risk profile by disabling security controls and exposing them, less guarded, to the internet. They didn't exercise the more prudent standard practice of copying the data to encrypted and local media for escort. Until there's an investigation done, there's no way to definitively prove who did it. Handorf concluded. No reason whatsoever for accessing the information. Let's do conflict of interest. Let's see. No reason. Oh, we already know they have no reason, so I can skip this probably. I'll just read this quote from this paragraph that says, let's just say, quote, I think this is very concerning, said Shaken. It could result in damaging individual workers, to union organizing campaigns, and to unions themselves, he said. It is bringing a wrecking ball into the dentist's office, meaning that this is widely disproportionate and raises real dangers, Shaken continued. A conflict of interest and danger of exposure. Labor law experts were particularly concerned about what they described as clear conflicts of interest, particularly when it comes to Elon Musk, his companies, and his vast network of former employees and allies who are now getting access to government jobs and data. Trump and Musk, during an interview with Fox News' Sean Hannity, said Musk would rescue himself from anything involving his companies. Remember that chart that's like Elon Musk attacking all of these government branches, and like all of them were investigating probes into his companies? I haven't asked the president for anything ever, Musk said. I'm getting a sort of daily proctology exam here, except for he's not, because he's literally deleting all of the information of his breach and not recording anything he's doing while he's accessing our information. It's not like I'll be getting away with something in the dead of night, but he's definitely trying, even if he won't, even if he hasn't yet gotten, he's definitely trying. Isn't that alarming? However, DOGE has been granted high-level access to a lot of data that could benefit Musk, and there has been no evidence of a firewall preventing misuse of that data. Exactly. There are multiple outgoing cases involving Musk and NLRB. For one, after a group of former SpaceX employees lodged a complaint with the NLRB, lawyers representing SpaceX, some of whom were recently hired into government jobs, filed suit against the NLRB. They argued that the agency structure is unconstitutional. Our government is fucking crumbling. Senator Chris Murphy raised his concerns about Musk accessing sensitive labor investigation data on cases against his companies or competitors during the confirmation hearing for Trump's labor security. Lori Chavez de Remer, excuse my pronunciation, in mid-February, he pressed her to answer whether she believed the NLRB is constitutional and to commit to keeping sensitive data confidential. While he said he was committed to privacy and said she suspects the NLRB's authority, quote unquote, he insisted that Trump, quote, has the executive power to exercise it as he sees fit, unquote. And Washington just turned in his grave one more time. All this is happening in the context of a broader attempt by the White House to hamstring labor agencies. The NLRB was created to guarantee workers' rights to organize and to address problems that workers have in the workplace, said Shaken. Gosh, that is definitely not how you pronounce that name. Of UC Berkeley. Under President Joe Biden, he recalled the labor movement enjoyed an unusual amount of support from Washington. But what we have seen is a sharp slamming of the brakes to that and putting the vehicle in reverse in terms of what Trump has done so far, he continued. That's a good analogy to everything that's happened since he took office in January. Trump got into his Tesla and slammed that reverse button and full pedaled it. It's not like he's a random person who's getting information that a random person shouldn't have access to, said Harvard Law's Block. But if they really did get everything, then he has information about cases the government is building against him, she said. DOGE is, whether they admit it or not, headed by someone who is subject of active investigations or prosecutions of cases. It is incredibly troubling, she said. Musk's company XAI could also benefit from sucking up all the data DOGE has been collecting to train its algorithms. Yes, that's exactly what we want. We want AI now to have our sensitive information. Perfect. Cybersecurity experts like Bruce Schneider, a well-known cryptographer and adjunct lecturer of Harvard Kennedy School, and have pointed to this concern at length in interviews and written pieces. All right, I think we get the gist. And it says, access for adversaries. The information could get out, of course. We already kind of covered that. A troubling pattern. Yeah, I mean, he's pretty much been doing this to every government agency. All right, we get the gist. I think that's pretty much... you can read the full rest of the article, but I think we get the gist of that. I mean, it's just awful all around.